Hey guys, it's been a while. Sorry about that. It has been an eventful holiday season, and then I had to start work, so I didn't have much time to actually, edit this video and put it out there, or record it even. So I actually finished this before the holidays started. The system where you could play a card from your hand, and then the card would actually be notified that, yes, it has indeed left the hand and is being played. And essentially, what we're basing this off of is Hearthstone. If I can get some gameplay up right now, if you take a look at it, you can see that. Let's say I were to play a minion card, you could see that once I move it upwards, I can sort of place it in a specific area on the board. And for spell cards, at least, or I'm not quite sure what they're called in Hearthstone anymore. But if you play them, you just have to drag them upwards out of your hand area. And if you drag them to the left, to the bottom, or around, it's not really played until it really hits the board. So we're going to be trying to replicate this in Unity, and it's actually not too difficult. And let's jump back into Unity. And I'm going to hit play right now, and we're going to take a good look at what I'm talking about, at least, or what I implemented. So let's draw a few cards. And if you can see here, if I draw the card, or just move it around, I don't know if it's recording my mouse. Oh, it is. Perfect. So if I drag it out, you can see that there is a message. So definitely this is like something happened here, right? So definitely Unity, or through our code, we do know that we actually played this card. And spell card as well. Yeah, it tells us we played the spell card. Perfect, right? So, and if we just drop it inside of our hand, nothing happens, which is our intended effect. So I guess for the rest of this video, I'm going to be covering how I'm going to be implementing this. And then in the next video, which is maybe hopefully the last one, just because I don't have that much time, we're going to talk about the basics of implementing card effects and things like that. Hopefully I can get it done. I have a good idea of how it may work, but I've never actually taken a look at it. So let's actually get started with talking about interfaces. So before we get started, let's actually talk about interfaces and what they essentially are. So if you look up here in this draggable card script, we have here in our declaration, we have mono behavior, I begin drag handler, I drag handler, and I end drag handler. So essentially all three of these are interfaces, and essentially what interfaces are, essentially there are things that have some functionality, but they actually need to be implemented in the class itself. So what do I mean by that? So if I scroll down here after our update, you can see that let's say I have on begin drag here, and it's very similar to the I begin drag handler. And essentially, we can't use I begin drag handler or this functionality with the event systems if we do not have this function. So let's say if I were to comment this function out, like so, and save it, it's going to be pretty upset with me, right? Because, and all it says is, I don't think it shows up on Streamlabs, but what it says is that the draggable card does not implement interface member I begin drag handler dot on begin drag. So on begin drag is this function right here. So let's say if I were to implement that function that they're asking for, I apologize for it not showing up, but once you mouse over the problem, it will show up. So all you have to do is just implement what they're asking for, and they are asking for on begin drag. So I would do, I don't know, public void on begin drag. Is it public void? Yes, it is. And then I also need a pointer event data as the parameter. So pointer event data, and then point, or call it event data, call it whatever you want. And then you can see that once I've implemented this, like just a very basic version of this, it doesn't really have anything, but it is indeed implemented, then this is no longer flagging red. So essentially interfaces are things that you can use, but they actually need to be implemented. And I'll leave a link in the description for a more in-depth look at what we're using. So let's see what this actually does for us. Actually, I'm pretty sure I showed it in the last video. If I do go back and forth, apologize. Just I'm recording these videos days apart from each other, and I'm not quite sure what I've done and what I have not done yet. So I'm going to uncomment this one, and we're going to essentially build the draggable card script from scratch, just to see how everything works. So right before we do that, we're going to jump over to player hand zone, and I believe this also has a few interfaces. I haven't cleaned this up, but I'm pretty sure we don't need all of these different ones. But essentially, if you can see the difference between these two, this one is for the card requires the drag handlers, because we're going to be dragging our cards out. Let's actually just jump back to Unity for a second, and I'll show you what I mean. By let's hit play. And if I draw some cards, you can see that I need to drag these objects, right? So what essentially is allowing this functionality is this event systems in the Visual Studio. My bad again. So this event systems definitely need to include this. And then along with this, I need the drag handlers so I can actually drag my card back and forth. And obviously there's the programming or the code that actually does the functionality. But before we do any of that, we do need all of this implemented. So if we jump back to Unity, you can see that, let's open the hand panel. I don't know if you can see it on the right. It's a bit cut off. Let's try to fix that. That's a bit better. Okay. So you can see that there isn't necessarily, we don't have that draggable card. And what we have is the player card usage system. No, I believe that's something else. Maybe the player hand panel. Let me just take a look again. Player hand zone. So yeah, the player hand zone is attached to this object. And what it essentially does is that it has information on the pointer. So that would be our mouse. So it knows when our pointer enters and when our pointer exits. In that case, I don't think I have any code in there right now, but let's say when my mouse exits this area, it would understand it. And why we need this is essentially that when we are dragging the card and the card passes a certain threshold, like at this point right here, you can see that my mouse is off of the hand panel, but it's still dragging the card. At this point, if we were to let go, it would then play the card, right? And obviously it does show up in our console. So that's essentially the idea of it. Let's actually make a script that allows us to drag our cards. Like I'll walk you through it and hopefully we'll be able to move on to the next part fairly quickly. We're going to try to implement the functionality, or we're going to create a script that implements a functionality that allows us to drag our card up and down. So right now, draggable card is now ticked on, and now because it's ticked on, we can drag it, right? So let's create a new script from scratch. So we can actually just add it on as a component, and you're going to see that we actually have the functionality that we need to drag the card up and down. So I'm going to open a new file in Visual Studio, and we'll begin working with that. So here is our new file. It's called test draggable card. I already have a fully done draggable card. So in this version, we're not going to be doing all the things that the draggable card has, as it has a bunch of different information that it's setting when you begin the drag. And it's essentially used for, I guess, returning the card. Actually, if we jump back to Unity. So like the second card has the functionality. Essentially, on begin click, we remember our location that we click the card. So if I let go and it's not being played, it's just going to snap back into place. So that's all that is. So we don't have to implement that. I mean, you will have to implement that if you want like a full card system and stuff like that. But for our demonstration purposes, we're just going to be allowing us to drag the card up and down and wherever we want, essentially. So if we jump back into Visual Studio, what we can see is that to implement this, we need a few things. We need UnityEngine.ui and UnityEngine.EventSystems. So let's actually start by using those two, or importing them rather. So the UI followed by the event systems, I believe. So yes, once we get those two, we also need a few things, which is the draggable handlers. So I will just copy these. So what was it? I begin drag handler. What was the second? I drag handler. Yeah, I drag handler. And the last one is I end drag handler. So yeah, once you've typed these in, you'll see that all of them are red, and that means we have to do something or it's not going to work, right? So the ones we need is on begin drag. So public void on begin drag, and it takes a event system, I believe. Event system event. Is it event system? Let me check. It is a pointer event data, my bad. Pointer event data, event data. So you can see that as long as we just implement the function, it's not going to be angry at us. So we need to actually provide it with some information. So let's just replicate this, and instead of on begin drag, I believe the second one was on drag itself. So on drag, and I'm assuming the last one is on end drag. Save it, and you can see that it's all nice and there's no errors. So in this version, we're not really going to be doing anything. The only thing we want to do is when we are dragging our card, we just want it to follow our mouse position, right? So I'm actually going to have to look back at the draggable card just for how to get the mouse position. Oh, okay. So apparently the event data that is being passed into the function contains the information of, I guess, where our mouse is located. So we can just use that as well. So we can do, so we're attaching this to our game object, which is our card. So we can just do transform.position is equivalent to, and you know what? Just for this demonstration purposes, we'll just use event data .x, event data .y, and z. Is it position? Event data.position? Let me check. Yes, it is position. Correct. Let's just copy that. Well, why isn't this working? Vector 2 does not contain definition for Z. Okay. Then it will just, okay, that's fine then. If it's just 2D, then I guess our last one will just be transform dot position dot Z. Oh, what's wrong now? Oh. Okay, there you go. We make a new vector 3 with that information. So what we're assuming is if we add this onto our card, all it's going to do is just follow our mouse in every position that is not the Z position. So let's add our component. I believe it was this script. Let's just slap it on. And now that we've done it on this game object, you can see that we can move it wherever. Obviously, when I let go, it's not going to snap back because we did not implement that. But you can see how we implement interfaces now. And that's essentially how I got the cards to function properly. And the next thing I'm going to be talking about is the system that I created that allows us to understand when a card has left our hand. So the final part of this video is essentially this player card usage system that I created. All it does is it has a reference to the selected card and the player hand, and I'll be going over this shortly. And essentially it allows us to know when a card has left our hand, or a card that we're using has left our hand, and it's also passed the threshold to be considered in our hand. So let's say right now, if I let go, you can see that it does say play unit, or let me move this back a bit. You can see that it says play unit card, and it's playing the correct card because we let go here. And the number also increases when we play the other card. All right, another day, another portion of the video. All right, this might be the last portion of the video, so let's actually talk about what we're going to do first. And I'm going to be showing you how I essentially got everything connected. I'm almost confident that what we do in this video is not optimal, like not even remotely optimal, but it does get the job done. And I think it might give you an idea of what to do, or maybe hopefully someone else can chime in with like a better method of doing this. So what essentially we're tackling in this video, or this portion, I guess, this section, is, if you recall, we just finished being able to drag the card, and then we learned a bit about interfaces and UI. So this final part, I don't know if I'm repeating myself from last time, but drag the card up, drop it. We do get a console right here. It just says, yeah, we played the card for sure, right? So we just drag it around. It's not going to increase the number at all. And yeah, so let's actually talk about how we did this. So let's actually take a look at what happens. So the hand panel, I just have to move my screen over just a bit again. Sorry. Is everyone? Okay, sure, great. So Let's see if I can expand this a bit. No? Oh yeah, I can. So player card usage system. So if we're to play right now, let's actually take a look at this one. Let's say I have a card. If I click and when I click and start dragging, I might want to do that to just click later on. But I think when I'm clicking and dragging, the selected card is the card that I'm holding onto. Then I move up. You can see that a check mark flags and the card has left the player hand zone. And the second I let go, because we have a selected card and the card has left the player hand zone, it's going to call this, and again, it's a bit difficult just because the screen is not sized very well. I will have to drag this over. There you go. So yes, we are definitely playing the card once these triggers are set. So let's actually take a look at the code and figure out what's happening. So now that we're in here, I'll just do this. Yep. So we have player hand zone, which is the rectangular hand that we had. So let's go. So that gray rectangle in Unity, this one. And if you recall, we have the pointer on pointer enter and pointer exit. And what happens is essentially when the pointer enters the box, so whenever our mouse is located within the box area, so within here, then the code that will essentially activate is this one. Because on pointer enter, like when the second we get in from anywhere in the UI element, we're going to set this to false. And then as long as the event data dot pointer drag, so whatever we're dragging is not null, then we can set the other flag. So you see that I'm dragging it around and nothing's happening, right? Because we didn't exit. And let's say we exit right now without holding on to anything, it's not going to change anything. Like you don't see any of the values changing down here. But the second we drag, the second we exit the area while dragging a card, you can see that check mark is now flagged, and then we let go and the thing pops. So, and that's how that essentially works. So player card system, which is the system that like the additional script that I made. So all it does is essentially what happens is it sets this flag. So where is the flag? Card is left player hand zone. It just sets that flag to true. So then play card, if true, then you do it, right? And the draggable card doesn't need to essentially send any information, I believe. Oh no, yeah. You call the play card. So how do we set this up? On start, you just get the component from the game object. So whenever you initialize a new card, I did add draggable card.cs to the actual card object itself. So then whenever we do instantialize it, it has to have the player card usage system as a component of its parent, if that makes sense. You don't have to do it this way. Definitely there's many different ways to implement this. You just need some reference to the system that essentially is communicating with everything. Because I didn't want to essentially have the hand zone and the cards itself talking to each other. And then I'd rather have one centralized system where all the communication is happening. So, and then essentially what happens on the draggable card, on end drag, so that's when we let go of the card and technically play it. What's going to happen is it's going to call the play card, and play card only triggers if the card has left the player hand zone. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So apologies, I'm not really explaining this too well. Essentially, draggable card on end drag calls play card. Play card is called here, and play card is only triggered when the player hand zone, when it detects that the mouse, the pointer, has indeed left the area, the playable card area, while holding onto a card. Because this won't trigger if you're not holding onto a card, because it's going to be equal to null. So as long as it's not null, you're probably holding onto a card, and then we could set it to true. So once you play a card, instead of just, I don't know, like at this point, instead of name, like maybe cost, do I have that? Mana? No. I unfortunately don't remember what I called it, and I don't feel like checking right now. So like maybe in your game you'd have like a mana system or something. So like, I don't know, check mana costs here. So like this is where like you play a card, make sure you have enough mana to actually play that card, and so on, right? So let's reset this, and then we're gonna see that once we draw a card, and once we load in, oh sorry, I gotta go back to Unity, draw a card, and drop, and you can see check mana cost right there. So like that's where you'd implement your mana cost if your game has one. I don't have one right now just because I'd have to tweak a lot with my old turn system from the previous game, and I currently don't feel like doing that. So I'm just like, this tutorial is gonna be like straightforward and basic, hopefully. And yeah, I hope that this tutorial helped you. And then the next part is also going to just be, I guess, talking about inheritance and setting up cards and like programming their effects and stuff. So yeah, that's probably going to be, I'll be tackling that in the next month, so maybe you'll see it then. Unfortunately, I don't work that fast, sorry. Maybe I will if I'm a bit more dedicated, but I guess you can look forward to it. Thank you. Bye.